took a 33-mile bike ride on Sunday, and it was at one point my wife said, well, I sometimes get bored on the ride, and I'm like, how do you get bored on the ride? I mean, I'm just my mind's going a mile a minute.
Matt Woolley Podcast.
Today, my guest is Mike Senn. Mike, thank you for being here.
It is my pleasure.
All right, so who is Mike Senn? You know how we do this, people. We get the background. So Mike Senn is a husband and father. He's a University of Oklahoma Price College of Business in Business Administration and Management and Marketing. He's part of Playtex Products with multiple roles over 15 years, ending with Senior Director of Walmart and Sam's Club team. He was Jarden Corporation's VP of Sales, Spectrum Brands Divisional Vice President, Treehouse Foods Vice President, Dow Group Executive Vice President, and was at Kind as Senior Vice President of Sales. And Mike, currently, you're the President of Wilde Chips. Did I get all of it?
All of it. That's quite a list.
Lots of expertise here. So let's get into it. Where did Mike Senn grow up?
I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Okay.
I was born in Chicago, and in first grade, my parents moved me to Minneapolis, which is a great place to grow up.
Really?
Absolutely loved it. Yep. Loved the 4 seasons. Well, maybe 3, because there's not much of a summer. But great place to grow up. A lot of outdoor activity. A lot of great corporations up there. I got my start with General Mills up there, and really led to a really great career. And so couldn't have been any happier growing up in Minneapolis.
Awesome. So what was it like growing up in Minneapolis? I can't really.
Yeah. So we moved in like June. It's funny, and I had grown up watching the Chicago Blackhawks on TV, and I wanted to be a hockey player really bad. So in June, we move in, and I go, Mom, come on, we got to go sign up for hockey. So what do you do in Minnesota? You play hockey. And unfortunately, I had to wait till the winter time to actually play.
Right.
But I played sports, a lot of water activities with 10,000 lakes up in Minneapolis, a lot of water activities. So we did the whole boating and, sailboarding and all that kind of stuff. So, Minneapolis is a great outdoor place, great education, just a great city. I couldn't say enough about it.
Very awesome. So are you accustomed to because you've been in Northwest Arkansas how many years now?
20 years.
That's just I was thinking we came here around the same time, 2002-ish, 2004-ish for you, right? Okay. So where were you before then?
So moved all over the place.
You've been all over because of
all over with the number of companies that I worked for. I actually moved about, I think it was 8 times. Spent a lot of time in the Northeast. So we lived in Connecticut. We lived in New York. We lived in Ohio, a couple different places. Actually found our way back to Minneapolis through the course of events. Thought I'd never leave. And I had done pretty much everything in my career, called with most of the major retailers across the U.S., and didn't have a chance to really touch and get close to Walmart. And my wife and I talked about it and said, you know what, this is probably a spot in my journey. I probably need to go down there. Needless to say, we were coming back. It was going to be 2 years, and we were going back to Minneapolis. There's no ifs, ands, and buts. As a matter of fact, we had a gym membership to Lifetime Fitness that we never got rid of because we're coming back. Right. We got down here, and after about 18 months, it took us a little while to get used to it, but we moved to a lake up in Bella Vista, and we lived up there for 13 years. And it was a lot of that Minnesota experience that we had around the water. And we just said, this is great. We've made this our home, and we absolutely love it. So,
is the weather nice for here?
We get 4 seasons, so it's there's no doubt. I mean, there are days I miss a good old snowfall, but for the most part, love the weather here.
Well, I've had buddies that have lived up in up north, and they'll talk about the adjustment of getting used to the cold, and they'll say days where like down here, we wouldn't touch the water up there. They're in their, when they'd be wearing jogging pants and sweat pants and all kinds of warm stuff, and their buddies would be playing in the water that grew up around it because the temperature is just so much different.
Yeah.
Well, what's an average temperature up there?
It depends again, time of the year. It's definitely below zero in the wintertime, and it's probably in the, it can get hot in the summertime, but for the most part, it's probably in the mid 80s.
That's awesome.
In the summertime. Yeah.
How about it's gorgeous, perfect summertime weather.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into your history a little bit. So, you that's where you grew up, but you went to the University of Oklahoma. What drove you to Oklahoma?
That's a great question. I played sports, as I mentioned, really wanted to play at the next level. And I didn't have, I had some small scholarship opportunities to play hockey up in Minnesota, but I really wanted to play baseball, which is another sport that I loved. And at the time, I wanted to study pre-med. And so I chose to pursue going to Oral Roberts University in Tulsa.
Okay.
And, I was pretty good at science, but probably not as good as I needed to be in science. And so I had a quick shift. And with me already being down in Oklahoma, I had become a huge fan of Oklahoma, their sports, and it was an easy transfer for me. And it was the greatest thing because I never would have picked Oklahoma, but it was a great school to go to. Not many people can say they got to go to a school that had a national championship while we were there.
Oh, that's awesome.
And we did, and that was kind of fun. So it was a great experience for me. So
that's awesome. What was your takeaway from the University of Oklahoma college experience? What impression?
Yeah, you know what? It's first of all, I had some really great professors, and I think that's where education starts. And so, hats off to them. But the atmosphere was great. It was a small college town, so we didn't have the hustle and bustle of the city. Everybody was focused, to be there at the school. And with such great sports, football and basketball were both really, really good at that time. There's a lot of camaraderie and a lot of good times.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's see. From the college, you went to Playtex Products, and you were there for 15 years. That's quite some time. Why don't you walk us through Playtex?
Yeah, I'll never forget. I was, early in my career, I was with General Mills, and I got a call from a recruiter, and I didn't even know what a recruiter was. And I'm like, I don't need a job. I've got a job, And he explained the opportunity that Playtex had, and what I looked at was, what is something that I can look forward to? And it was real great. My early mentor told me that he basically said, hey, I would always look at my career in 5-year increments. And so that's something that I did. I said, okay, what's the next 5 years look like? And at General Mills, it started slowing down. There were a lot of slowness in the business. And there was an opportunity at Playtex that not only from a business perspective, but a real growth perspective, gave me an opportunity to step into what they called a field manager and training role, which gave me the opportunity to touch a lot of the business in a very quick manner, which was a great opportunity. And that led me to probably 4 or 5 very quick promotions. And as a young, aspiring business person, that was appealing. So everything that they had said would be a part of the role and job came true. And so Playtex was a great company for me to cut my teeth on because they were in so many different categories. So not only did they have fem care and baby care, but they also had sun care, which a lot of people don't know, which eventually became our biggest part of our business.
Okay.
And so all those businesses were very different in how you competed with the different competitors. With
are these products that you would say can probably compete with like the likings of Unilever, Kimberly-Clark?
Yeah, so all the
Procter & Gamble.
Procter & Gamble, exactly. And so we were a small company competing against the giants, the best in the industry. So it was good. It kept you fast and nimble for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you transitioned over. If you want to go through this, we can. Jarden Group, Spectrum Brands, Treehouse Foods.
You know what? I would say this. I mean, when we get to Northwest Arkansas, a lot of companies want to move you back to their home office. And at that point, I was raising my family, and my family came first. And I said, you know what? From time and again, I'm going to need to make a change because I want to stay here in Northwest Arkansas. And that's really the story that I have, is that there were opportunities.
It's a very familiar story.
Came along.
Happens a lot all the time.
And there's a lot of competition for good people, good talented people, and I guess I could qualify for that. And so there was a lot of good opportunity, and one opportunity led to the next. And so it was really about servicing this customer in this backyard, Walmart and Sam's. And I got to work across the whole box in many different categories, and it was a great run of experience, each one of those companies I worked with.
That's awesome. I want to talk about Kind, because I was looking at the time that you were there as a pretty pivotal time for that brand.
It was the time when they were getting ready to be bought by a strategic. The plans were already in place. And it's interesting when you're with a small company, and certainly I'm with one now, you do things, or smaller companies can have a tendency to just kind of go with the flow rather than having very strict processes. And I think that's one thing that happened at Kind.
Let me stop right there. Do you enjoy that?
I do, but I also appreciate process. And I would say that's one thing that we've been able to establish at Wilde, is because I brought several of my Kind team members along with me on the ride. And so we've put some of those processes early on in the development of our company, which I think has been beneficial. And where I was going with this, Matt, is when I first started with Kind, we had like 18 different price lists.
No, wow.
And we really needed to synergize that and bring that down to just a few. It's the right thing to do. And so we went through that process. That took a lot of harmonizing a lot of different things to be able to do that. And so that was one thing that we had to do. The second thing is, when you're trying to grow a brand, so often you've got to heavily invest in that brand and maybe overinvest because the competition is fierce. You've got to gain share. You've got to gain household penetration. You've really got to grow your brand. And so we had gotten to the point where Kind was really in that growth phase, that high growth phase, and we need to start trimming back some of the trade spend. And so we needed to increase our EBITDA and drive some of the trade spend out of there. So between the pricing and the price list that we had and streamlining everything, that's kind of what we went through to really get things ready for the acquisition, and then Mars came in.
Okay, awesome. So now you're the president of Wilde Chips. So I know all about Wilde Chips because we've had the pleasure of doing business with you guys, and we appreciate that.
Of course.
And but to our listeners and our viewers, tell us about everything that is Wilde.
Yeah, that's a great question. When I left Kind, I really had a lot of different relationships in the industry, and I sought out a lot of different founders, and I wanted to understand a little bit about the founder. And I also really investigated the product. It's so hard to come up with white space ideas today. And what Jason, our founder, created with Wilde is a chip that's never been done before. And so for me, that was something that I wanted to make sure that we could take a brand similar to Kind and scale it as quickly as we could. And I knew that protein was certainly something that consumers were interested in. And we deliver 5 times the protein and half the carbs of potato chips. And I guess I should back up because a lot of people don't know what Wilde is. I'm assuming they do.
Yeah, let's hear the whole story because it's a great story and it's a great product. So let's hear all of it.
Yeah, so Jason, he's from South Carolina, and he grew up eating potato chips. And that was his comfort food. And he came to realize that he had a family that had diabetes in his history. And so at one point in his life, he said, you know what, I've got to start watching the carbohydrate intake. And so he started off with a meat-based bar. It was called Wilde. It was the time Epic was coming out with a meat-based bar.
Was this era 2013, 14-ish?
That would be correct.
Okay.
Yep. And he realized that he did not have a differentiated product. He realized that his product, frankly, just did not taste that good. So at the bottom of a potato chip bag, his comfort food that he had growing up as a kid, he said, there's got to be a better way. And so he just got a home air fryer and just started practicing. Eventually, he connected with somebody from Colorado State University. They have a great food science department. Derek Spores is his name. Those two took off on a journey, and that journey took a while because initially he tried to make the product in a pork rind facility. He was going to go through a co-man process and just couldn't do it. Made a complete mess. But in that process, he realized that he could develop some equipment, and so we now have patented equipment that produces our product, which really was the solve for making the chip that we make today. It's a fantastic product that we've spent a lot of time on, and I think that product quality has continued to get better and better. We really think that as the consumer looks for more protein and tries to eliminate some of their carbohydrates, that we're really seeing a lot of consumers gravitate towards that. So it's been a great ride to this point.
Let's talk more about the chip. So as a guy that's tried to, trim the carbs, sometimes successfully, sometimes unsuccessfully, I absolutely love the Wilde chips. I do. Now, no slander to any other brand, the Quests and all the other guys out there. They make a good product. But I will say that I love the crispness and the flavor of the chip. I also love the shape of the chip, too. Now, you guys have specifically done work to create that shape. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so go off a little bit of that. Tell us a little bit about the chip itself and, the flavor offerings. And I'd be also interested on how you guys come up with the flavor offerings, because you've got some pretty unique flavor offerings, too.
Matt, I'm not very good at this. I'm
all right.
I'm struggling a little bit. But I will tell you this. I forgot one key ingredient in the whole story.
Okay.
Is the way that we don't have carbohydrates in our product, and it's how it's different than Quest. Quest gets their protein out of a whey protein. We actually use chicken breast. So I should back up to that and say, listen, we use chicken breast, egg whites, and bone broth. Those are the primary ingredients that we use. We actually take those products and we fully cook them in a smokehouse. So then the product is completely edible. But in order for us to get the moisture out of the product, we put them in what we call a crisper. Okay. It's not a fryer that you'd see at McDonald's and do your French fries. It's just a light layer of oil. And what we do is, on that patented equipment, we've got these bulldozer tracks, is the way that Jason would describe it. And those bulldozer tracks is what kind of holds it on the belt as it goes through the system. And that's what creates that wave that you're talking about. But that light, very short period of time on that oil, that's what burns all the water off. And that's what enables us to get that crispness.
That's awesome. So the flavors, well, do you want to talk about the flavors?
Sure. We've really tried to develop a line of flavors that really go with chicken. So the first one I'll start off with is chicken and waffle.
Yeah, it was delicious.
It's one that is very unique in the market. It's got less than 1 gram of sugar, but it's got that sweetness that really is very unique. Tastes just like chicken and waffle. Awesome. We also have just a Himalayan pink salt, which is our basic salt, salt and vinegar. We have our buffalo, which is our number one, so it tastes just like a buffalo chicken wing, which is fantastic. Our new flavor is spicy queso.
I haven't had that one yet.
That's good. It's our first entry with a dairy product, so it's got real cheese in it.
Oh, awesome.
So it's really, really good. We've got a barbecue. We've got a Nashville hot, which is my favorite.
Yeah, that's good.
And that last one I mentioned was chicken and waffle.
Yeah, they're all delicious. All delicious. Yeah, for a quick plug for Wilde chips. If you haven't tried it, give it a shot. It truly is. As a guy, so just I can relate to Jason 120% because I can't tell you how many bags of chips that I've plowed. I've never met a chip that I didn't like.
Yeah.
And so these are just a great, I wouldn't even call them a substitute because it's not really a substitute. It's not because they're not an identical product. It's a better for you product.
Correct.
And it tastes great. You get all the crispness and crunch that you want, all the flavor, the flavor bombs that you want out of a chip. But it's I don't know. It's just good. Try it, people. It's a fantastic product.
Yeah.
So what's anything new on the horizon for anything that's happened recently with Wilde that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I mean, I would say that we're focused on this business. We're in a $55 billion category.
Mm-hmm.
We have about 2.4% household penetration.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot more consumers to reach. And I'll tell you one thing that we do a lot of is we call it chips to lips. Mm-hmm. We love to get out into the market. We've done it at the Bentonville Bike Fest. We've done it at several other events here locally. Because when we see people try the chip, they're like, that's wild. It's amazing how they refer back to the brand name. It's great because it's so hard to believe. A chip that's made of chicken, but it's very similar to a potato chip. So we're focused heavily on that. We do have some innovation that we've been testing, so we're very excited about that.
Can't talk about it today, I'm sure.
I don't have that today, but we do have some expansion plans with our current plant. We're putting in...
and y'all in Nashville, right?
We have a headquarters in Nashville, home office there, but we also we manufacture in Lexington, Kentucky.
Okay.
So we started off with one line. We added a second line about a year ago. We'll have our third line, which is going to be bigger than the first two combined. That line will go in January of 2026.
Awesome.
So we're really excited about that because we've actually got some new technology that's going to come behind that. It's going to make us far more efficient. We think the quality will improve slightly. So we're really excited about the future.
That's great. That's great. That's fantastic. Okay, so let's switch a little bit. Let's get into the brain of Mike Senn.
Oh boy, this will be a short conversation.
Well, so on this podcast we try to bring value and insight based on you and I have talked about this already, but we try to bring value and insight through experience. There's a lot of people out there that just don't have, I wouldn't say credible backgrounds, but not extensively credible backgrounds, And whenever we have somebody on here, we want to, get into the nuts and bolts of, wisdom nuggets, really, from their experience. So I got a few questions for you here. What's one piece of advice you wish you would have received early in your career?
Wow. I would say that I probably underestimated relationships. And I think so many times that we get real driven to be successful. And so there are moments when you pound your chest or you self-promote or you do things to try to really get ahead in your career. And I think that relationships along the way are super important. And I think I always understood that, but probably not to the degree I do today, because I think relationships are the most important thing in business. It's still, as much as we talk about fact-based selling and the importance of data, which I fully support, it still matters who you are, what you represent, how you work with people, how you inspire people, how you motivate people, how people look to you. Do they trust you? Will they walk through a wall for you? So I think relationships are so important in today's business for sure.
That's fantastic. Can you talk about any type of books or mentors or anything of that nature that you've had along the way that have inspired you to be a better leader, to be a better, skilled worker in the workplace? Is there anything that sticks out when we, is there a specific book or is there a specific time that this had an impact on you, or a mentor that had an impact on you?
I think that's a broad question.
It is.
A little bit of everything that kind of pieces it together. I think that, I've got to look to my dad for one. I think he was fantastic at really showing me the kind of the value of kind of hard work. And I think he also led by example. And, he was a man of faith that certainly had a huge impact on me understanding all the things that I know about character. And so I would say that my dad would be a huge mentor from that perspective. I don't know if there's any one single book that I could point to, but I think that's.
Yeah, well, I'm the same way. I've read a million books over the years, and I'm lucky if I can pull like a couple of sentences from it to make an impact. But the way I look at it is if one thing sticks, it was successful. So how does Mike Senn handle setbacks? So when an obstacle comes, when a failure comes, what do you have? Because I will tell you this much. When I ask this loaded question, I'm good about all these loaded questions, Mike. When I ask these loaded questions, I can tell you my advice today would be far different than my advice 20 years ago as a young man. There's those learning along the way, what life teaches us. And I was much more temperamental in my young days, obviously. And so what advice do you have? When failure comes or when an obstacle comes or a letdown comes, what does Mike Senn do?
I think that it's, life is short, and I think that's one thing you appreciate as you age is you realize that, this life is but a blur. And so many things I think that I used to think were a big deal. I think I've learned a little bit. Don't sweat the small stuff. I think that and then what is the small stuff? I think everything is. I think what is important. It gets back to life and relationships. If you can keep those strong, any setbacks that you have, that you can lean back into those relationships that you have. But again, I think that disappointments, things are going to happen that are out of your control. And if they're out of your control, the way you react to them, I think needs to be, just well thought out, and just, simply realize that, take a few steps back, take a breath, and realize that, you can get through this. And so very different the way I handle setbacks today. I guess the definition of setbacks too. I mean, little things used to probably upset me a little bit. Like, I didn't do this, or I didn't get this accomplished. This is bad. And the world would come to the end, and now I'm like, those are little things. So again, if it's not impacting you personally or your relationships, what is that setback could be so bad? I mean, there's ways around it. I mean, I think even in, relating it to business, I mean, we deal with setbacks. Every day is a setback. I just got to figure out a way to figure out how do I get around that, or how do I get through that? And that's by just, taking a breath and saying, hey, why don't we take this path? Getting other people involved in the conversation about how can we fix this, and then just trying to get through it.
Is that something you look for when you're building a team?
I definitely think so. I mean, I think, collaboration with your team members is super important. And, not every personality is going to be the same. And I think that one of the things that I've learned is really trying to understand everybody's perspective, and it's going to be different. And that diversity that you have in your team really brings the strength of the team. But you've got to be able to listen to really what's on their heart and what's on their minds, because you never know, what seems to be maybe not such a good idea could be a really good idea if you just give it a chance.
Let's talk about culture for a second. You just had something that just popped in, made this thought pop in my head. Yeah. So we're talking about all the great characteristics of people, but we all know that sometimes in situations there's people that can be, like a culture drain. People that just aren't a good fit for whatever reason, or, dragging the party down, if you will. I mean, what are some of the indicators, in all these years of leadership? You must have come across this, a few times.
Sure.
So what are the indicators that Mike Senn looks for whenever these things are in their head?
The thing that I think frustrates me probably the most is people that may have a little bit of a challenge, maybe admitting that there was maybe some fault that they had or something didn't happen. I think when people are self-aware and are able to communicate about that, I think that's a good situation. Everybody's going to make a mistake. But when I see people that are saying, well, I sent you an email, 3 weeks ago in paragraph 9, sentence 3, that stated my opinion, to me, that's getting to the point where you're just trying to cover yourself, and it may not be, right or wrong. Whatever was in paragraph 9, was that accurate, or was that really something to go back towards? I think it's so much easier just to have an upfront conversation and be transparent. And I think people that hide behind those kinds of tactics don't fit well as a team, right? I think people that are more upfront and communicate better, I think that's super important.
Would you call that a lack of humility kind of thing?
I would say so. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Do you see a trend of that? And I know you talk about having a great team, but I mean, have you seen or heard of people speaking of issues like this in the workplace? The reason why I ask you that loaded question is because I have. Yeah. For some reason, and maybe it's just circumstantial, as of recent, I've had several very close friends in this industry and abroad that said, for whatever reason, people are just lacking humility to fess up, to look, I did wrong. And I look at it from a perspective of, it's okay to make a mistake. It's all right. It's whenever we're making the same mistake 2 or 3 times, so that's really we got a big bad issue on our hands. But just saying I messed up, or just saying I overlooked this, or just saying I should have done that better. That's a key indicator for me. I mean, do you see these?
I think that's exactly what I'm saying. It's a great point. And, I think that's even, we talk a lot about growth. I think my degree of humility has gotten better over the years, right? Because we talked about that earlier, about the fact that, I had to prove myself. I have to drive hard, and it was about relationships. But the way that the relationships got better was really because I became more humble in situations, right? And I think that's true, is those people that are really protective of themselves and who they are. And I think sometimes if people would just humble themselves a little bit, I think that forms a much better work environment, teamwork.
I absolutely agree. So for the young, ambitious business people out there, what advice can Mike give for working themselves into a leadership role? What advice would you offer?
Got to work hard. There's no doubt about it.
I got to put in the work.
Everybody's out there working hard to grow their career. So that happens. But again, like I said, I think, understanding relationships and the people that you work around are really, really important. And the people that I interact with, even outside of my world, with my company, the people that I have a lot of respect for, you look at, I think Doug McMillan is a phenomenal leader, and everything that I see Doug do out in the world outside of work even is just the way that he, works with people, and I think that's awesome. I think that the people that look and look towards him as kind of somebody that has been a good mentor towards others, those people I think have really been successful. So
what are the best qualities when you're looking for leadership at Wilde, Chips, or anywhere else you've been? What qualities are you looking for in a leader?
Yeah. One, I think, it really gets back to their experience for sure. I mean, if you've got to have good experience. And then I think, super important to have strong communication skills. I think somebody that has the ability to think on their feet. I think it's super important you can pretty quickly realize just the countenance of people and how they come across. Are they thinking of others? Are they thinking of themselves? Are they into, trying to grow their career only at the expense of others? I think, those are the things that you want to try to avoid. Those people that are just self-promoters. And so, I think that, character is everything, and looking for people that, emulate, goodness and for the right reasons, I think is important.
What about habits? So every leader I know has some form of habits. So what is the habit of Mike Senn? And I know you're an early bird because we have had phone calls at 6 a.m. before.
Yeah.
And that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because me too. So what about Mike Senn? What are some good habits?
Yeah. I think for sure the early bird gets the worm, for sure. I mean, that helps you prepare for the day. I think the preparation that you have mentally in the morning, quiet time that you might have, love a cup of coffee. It's a great way to start the day. I think that's important. The more you have the opportunity to sit down and prep out your day, just the more efficient it's going to go. I think you have less distraction. I think that's really important. I think it's important to also be intentional. Like, what are my goals today? What am I going to set out to achieve? And then when you do achieve them, check them off, and be sure to celebrate those wins that you have throughout the day. And I think I'm a big fan of momentum. Positive momentum, I think, drives success. And I think with proper, planning in the morning, execution through the day, I think it just makes you have a successful day, and it just translates throughout the week and the future.
So let's talk about decompressing for a moment, because we all know that we get caught in the crosshairs a lot.
Yeah.
What does Mike do to decompress? Like, you've got to put away work for a second. What's the best thing that Mike can advise for both physical and mental health?
Man, I tell you what, I always lean into family, and I want to make sure that things are right there. First of all, with my wife, kids, grandkids, whatever the case may be. Secondarily, I then look to myself, and I think things that really help are getting on a mountain bike and getting out and doing exercise. So anything that I can do, going on a long bike ride, a way to think out on the road. I think we took a 33-mile bike ride on Sunday, and it was, at one point my wife said, well, I sometimes get bored on the ride. And I'm like, how do you get bored on the ride? I mean, I'm just, my mind's going a mile a minute, but I think that gets the juices flowing. And
is that where your ideas come to?
It does. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Everybody has their own people that are into that type of ideation or forward thinking. I tell everybody some of my best ideas have come to me either in the shower or weed eating. Don't know why, but just part of that. I was on another podcast, got invited to participate. A big talk about small business, great podcast. Quick plug for those guys. But in that, we were talking about how breaking yourself away from the business and allowing you to. The funny thing is you allow yourself to get away from it, but you're never really away from it. At least I'm not. Mm-hmm. You take it differently. Mm-hmm. Like on vacation, if I have time to, stare off into the horizon, I'm usually thinking about, this idea, this popping in my head. Is that how that works for you?
Yeah, it's such a good point. I mean, it's because what happens is you have so many emails, you've got so much going on every single day. Mm-hmm. The list just keeps getting longer and longer. It's those times that you get away, then all of a sudden that big vision or that big idea comes through. The epiphany. And that's so important. And so stepping away, to your point, and it's a great question, is so important in, being that strategic person that you need to be.
A great mentor once told me, he said, you're not to, some people think when they're trying to, some people aren't going about the right thinking, is what he said. He said, when you're trying to turn that curve, get around it, and or when situations are a little sticky, the worst thing you can do is bury yourself in the work. Mm-hmm. He said, you've got to get out of the office. Mm-hmm. You've got to get away and allow your mind to rest for a second, and then it will come somehow or another by the grace of God. Mm-hmm. All the pieces of the puzzle all of a sudden stick together and it comes to you. But for whatever reason, when you're just buried in it, it's hard to get past.
Yeah, that's great.
So if you could give one piece of advice to someone that's feeling stuck in their career, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I sound like a broken record. I got to tell you, I get back to just the relationship thing. Mm-hmm. If you get to a roadblock, man, I tell you what, it's so good. I mean, I don't care if it's somebody in the business, if you're talking about business, if it's somebody outside the business about business, or if it's just a personal struggle. I think it's really important to have key people in your life that you can go and have an open, honest, humble conversation with. Mm-hmm. Because so many times is that person from the outside looking in that may not know where you're at, but it may trigger something that says, you know what, that's a good thought. And I'm doing that today. I mean, you're asking all these questions. And you know what, my mind's just going, and there's so many things that trigger from that relationship, from that conversation, that I think can help you.
It's good to get a perspective that's outside looking in. Mm-hmm. It's hard to sometimes, I'll agree with you 100%. It's hard to sometimes get the judgment internally. Everybody sees it and they're in the same weeds that you are, one fashion or another. But just having somebody outside look at it simplistically, sometimes someone just gives you the simple answer that's right under your nose the whole time. And that's where it's great to have good relationships, good mentors, good friends that, can give wise counsel. Let me repeat that. Wise counsel.
That's a great point.
I tell everybody all the time, some of my best friends, no joke, well, not most of, 95%, with the exception of 2 of my best friends are 10 years older than me. Don't know why that is, but it's been so valuable to me in my life because I've been able to see the forks in the road long before they get there. Yeah. And it's also great to be able to pick up a phone and say, hey, had this go down, what are your thoughts? And then you'll hear something like, oh, yeah, I kind of had a similar situation, or, oh, yeah, here, be careful about this. And that's great. It's like, it's like almost having a crystal ball. You can see what the future's going to bring. So last question for today, Mr. Senn.
All right.
What gives Mike Senn joy?
Oh, wow.
Let's cover it all.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a great question to end with, right? I mean, ultimately, we live in this complex world, right? And, we navigate through business, we navigate through struggles, personally. But, if we're not doing it for a bigger purpose, which is where I feel like where joy comes from, then does it really matter? You know, you hear so many times the story of people on their deathbed. It's not like they say, hey, I wish I would have made more money, right? It's, hey, I wish I would have spent more time with my family, or whatever that thing is that gives you joy. And so I think the thing that, you know, really gives me joy is really sharing situations that I can with people about my life experience and about things that why I might be the person I am today versus not being the person I am today. And, you know, I think that I don't mean to be vague about that. I think that it's more that, you know, we come across different road, you know, forks in the road, and I could have made certainly some very, very different decisions, but I think my moral compass has provided some direction that has been valuable. And I think when I can share some of those experiences with people and it can help them and we build a better relationship from that, I think that's where I get a lot of joy. All the other things, I love bike riding. I love enjoying life. I love being out on the boat. I love fishing. I love whatever. That's not where the true joy comes from. I get a lot of reward from really the relationships that I have.
That's wonderful. Well, Mike, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I hope you'll come on again.
I certainly enjoyed it.
All right.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Mike.
Yeah, you bet.